good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm the event director at Literati Bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're pleased to welcome CateMoran in support of How to Be a Woman in conversation with Peggy Orenstein. Some Zoom etiquette. You heard me as you zoomed in that you're muted and you'll remain muted, and the chat is closed as well. We do ask that you keep your video off through the duration of the event as well. But while the chat is closed to the public, I still encourage you to keep that chat window open in Zoom. I'll be in there periodically to drop links to purchase books from literatibookstore.com. We can ship anywhere in the United States. Unfortunately, we can't at this time ship internationally. And as well, you can use that chat function to send me privately and directly any questions you have for the Q&A after Peggy and Caitlin speak. I'll ask a few of those questions, select a few of those questions, time permitting. But whenever spirit moves you, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat. As a reminder, you can purchase More Than a Woman in the link that I'll send in the description, and if you're watching later on YouTube, in the description below me, and on our website, literatibookstore.com. And you can also shop for more books there at literatibookstore.com. Thousands of titles are available for curbside pickup if you live in Southeast Michigan. In lieu of a book purchase, we'd also like to ask that you consider a $5 donation to sustain our virtual programming. So whether you'd like to think of that as a donation for the week or the month of October coming up, or the remainder of the year, you can make a donation at literatibookstore.com/donation. Otherwise, we simply thank you for your attendance this evening, this afternoon, this morning. Caitlin is zooming in all the way from London, England, so it's near midnight there, and we really appreciate her possibly disrupting her circadian rhythms to be here. Hope not, but thank you. And so yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our author and our moderator. CateMoran's debut book, How to Be a Woman, was an instant New York Times bestseller. Her first novel, How to Build a Girl, received widespread acclaim. More Than a Woman is her most recent book. She lives in London. You can follow her on Twitter at CateMoran. And Peggy Orenstein is the New York Times bestselling author of Girls and Sex, Cinderella Ate My Daughter, Waiting for Daisy, Flux, and Schoolgirls. A contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine, she is published in USA Today, Parenting, Salon, New Yorker, and other publications, and has contributed commentary to NPR's All Things Considered. She lives in Northern California. Please join me in using your Zoom clap, reaction, or heart functions to welcome Caitlin and Peggy into your living rooms.
We've got an actual clap function, our hands, because we're on video, so that
well. We actually can clap at all of you for being
hands.
Here.
Thank you for joining us. I love how that intro sounds like a kind of pre-flight thing. I was kind of expecting him to finish with, and now push your trays into a seat back position and get ready for takeoff. It feels like
on a chat. And let's buckle in. So hi, first of all, thanks for being here from a million miles and infinite hours away. That's really great.
It's always lovely to see you. Last time I saw you, we were in a bar drinking the fine wines of San Francisco, and I wish we were there again now.
It is absolutely so. And it's the one sort of bright spot in a dark time is that we get to have these meetups on Zoom where we can see one another when friends and interesting folk are far away. So I'm really glad for that. And I'm really excited about the new book. And I don't know, maybe actually we should just start with, you have some words of joy and wisdom for we American feminists who are sitting here and going, what do we do now? Have you been watching? Have you been thinking? Do you have...
Oh God, yeah. No.
Can you save us?
Well, I mean, the only plan that we were talking about this earlier, the only thing that I can hope that will happen at some point is that Donald Trump will be live on television and will shit his pants. I think that's probably the only way out of your whole situation at the moment. If anything else happens, he'll become a martyr. People will rally behind him, but I don't think you can rally behind a man who has shat his pants live on TV. So that's as intelligent and political as I can be. It's literally my only plan.
And as I said, the downside is that then he would say, and it was the biggest shit that anybody has ever taken, ever. Anyway, let's talk about your book. So tell me about the why. Tell me about why'd you decide to write about midlife?
I first of all, I hadn't realised it was 10 years since I'd written How to Be a Woman, and I'd always thought that I would probably write another book about being a woman at some point, but I presumed it'd probably be when I was 70, and it would mainly focus around the menopause, and it would just be about being old and then dying, because I didn't know anything about middle age, because it's not written about. I didn't realise it's this whole other distinct phase in which everything changes, and which everything you have so arduously learned up until your sort of 30s, early 40s just becomes irrelevant. And you kind of have to start again from scratch, because when you're younger, and as I chronicled in How to Be a Woman, you have the luxury of all your problems being your problems. They're all things that are going wrong in your life. You're working out who you are and what you want to do, and, you know, your sexual style and a bra that will fit, and kind of, you know, who you should marry, whether you should get married, whether you should have kids. They're all your problems. When you get to middle age, everything changes, because suddenly all your problems are other people's problems. You are in the center of so many generations exploding. Your parents get old, they fall ill, they become frail, they become dependent. Your teenagers reach their adolescence, and suddenly that's a whole 5 bags of shit you've got to carry around. Your friends start divorcing, and suddenly you realize that basically, if you're a reasonably sorted middle-aged woman, it becomes your job to hold the fabric of society together with your bare hands for no pay or credit at all. And and having realized that this was what middle age was like, I was like, women need a book about this, where there isn't finger wagging or kind of despairing, but just putting an arm around them and going, mate, let's compare notes. Are you finding this really weird and hard? I'm finding this is really weird and hard. Here's some stuff I've learned, and here's some stuff where if I haven't learned something, I've got some jokes that will hopefully get you through.
And I loved it so much, I have to say. And I was thinking when I was reading too, that when we first met, which now Caitlin was 12 years ago.
Probably, yeah. God.
Something like 8 years ago. 8 years ago. So it was a long time ago. You were not in middle age. I was. So welcome to my world. And I love that the book is organized in the hours of a woman's day. And I wondered if you could talk about that structure. Why did you use that structure?
Well, when I wrote How to Be a Woman, when I started writing it, I found it very difficult, because technically I couldn't work out how to do it, because I wanted it to be a memoir, sequential telling of the story of my life. But I also wanted these big pieces of polemic and kind of like talking about, you know, explaining what feminism was and how it's applicable to our lives in all these different situations. And once I'd finally worked out how to do that you start with a vignette from your normal life and then you expand it out to be about everybody's problems, it then became a very popular format. And in a good way, many people completely stole this and wrote books with exactly the same format. So when I was going to write the sequel to it, I was like, well, I either rip myself off and maybe even get accused of ripping other people off, forgetting that I invented this, or I come up with a whole new format. And once I realized the 24 hours of a day format would work the best, because at the end of every day, if you're a middle-aged woman, you just go, what the fuck was that? What have I just, how did I pull that off? Am I even halfway through my to-do list? What happened to me today? And so when you finally put down 24 hours in a woman's life, each chapter being a different issue and a different hour of the day, you suddenly realize why you're so tired when you go to bed. It's like, you have to deal with all these things in a day, from funny things and little things and long-term projects to massive cataclysmic life events, and then try and find some kind of happiness and joy at the end of it, in order to make sure it was all worthwhile. So once I knew that was the format, I was so pleased with it. I wanted it to be like a medieval book of hours, where they have medieval times, they had the book of hours, like, 7 o'clock is the time where you make the wine and 8 o'clock is where you feed the hens. And it feels like that's very much what your life is like as a middle-aged woman, but with less hens and less wine, because that's one of the things you realize: you can't drink wine when you get older. It hurts.
Right. Yeah. And I love, so we have the hours of the list, of the to-do list. We have the hours of the ancestors when we are taking care of our elders. I was particularly fond of the hours of married sex. So let's go straight there and talk about the joy of the maintenance shag.
Yes, maintenance shag. So this is my great friend Sally Hughes's extraordinary invention and gift to the world. And some people who haven't read the book have misunderstood this and have thought that it's a woman who has no interest in sex, sort of lying back and thinking of England and letting a man have sex in order to keep the relationship together. And that's not what it is. It's a couple who still want to have sex, but you're just too busy. You don't have in the course of a week and then a month and sometimes a year. You're like, well, where would I fit that in? And sex is a weird thing in that if a certain amount of time elapses since you've last had it, it gradually becomes more and more ridiculous, the whole idea that you ever did it in the first place. You're like, we used to do what? And you would say, what? And you put that there, like, oh, that seems very unlikely. I don't think we ever did that, and I don't think we ever will. And so you have to put it in your schedule. You have to have it in your schedule. And how it happens is it will put it in the schedule. We always do it at 8:30 on a Friday once the kids have gone to school. And for the first 10 minutes, you're like, oh, this is weird. Oh, it's a bit embarrassing. It's strange. And then you get to a point where you get into it and you're like, oh, now I remember. Hurrah! And then what often happens if you've done the maintenance shag is it sort of gets things going again. And the next day, sometimes you find yourself having a spontaneous shag off the back of it, a kind of free ride, a bog off. But there's no other way that you will fit it into your life. So if you're waiting to spontaneously find the point where you can rekindle your sex life with no schedule, it will never happen. Simply years will go by and everything will seal up and you'll forget about it.
And on a related note, you have a chapter that is one of my absolute, something that I feel personally and evangelical about, which is naming the vulva, the hour of the vulva.
Yes.
And tell me about that. And it interested me because in the first book, in How to Be a Woman, you talk about naming your cunt. And now you are naming the vulva. And that's a really different thing. And I wondered if you could talk to me about that journey and why it's important to feminism.
Well, feminism has done so much great stuff in the last 10 years. Like, we have lived through an amazing time in feminism, and it's mainly been focused on young women, and a lot of it has been about our sex lives and reclaiming our bodies. And feminism has done so much good and strong work in making the word vagina acceptable. Like, in the UK, we've got young female comedians who will just appear on comedy panel shows and they will just vagina, vagina, vagina. And that is such good work. But when you realize that that's not the right word, the vagina is just simply the inside bit. It's not the outside bit. So when you turn up in a pub and you go, sorry, I'm late, I was climbing over a fence and I banged my vagina. You haven't, unless it went really, really wrong. You will have banged your vulva. And we just need to be using the right word, because if we're going, oh, well, it's basically the same thing. It's like if a man was going, I was pissing through my balls yesterday. It's not, they're in the same area, but it's a completely different thing. And we look foolish if we are not naming our body parts correctly. So we did great work on vagina, but sadly, we need to just have a quick meeting and go, it's got to be vulva now. We need to start doing that. Obviously, I still prefer the word cunt. The etymology of the word cunt is very interesting. All the other words for the vagina that are technical are to do with the vagina being a receptacle, or the vulva being a receptacle for a penis. And cunt from the Old English is the only word that just stands on its own. It just means your female genitals, not in relation to you having sex or it for being, I think vulva means sheath, doesn't it? And it's like the sheath for the penis. But
vagina.
Cunt is the only thing, or is it vagina? Yeah. But cunt is the only thing that just simply means your genitals, whether or not you're having sex with them. But it's very, I mean, I've tried my best, but it's still very hard to use that word on British television. I suspect America isn't any more loosey-goosey on that. So if we are to use a word, it must be the medically correct word, which is vulva.
Yes, and people are very, so I would like to, even though I know you're all muted, I would like you all to just take a second, and we will do it, and just say 3 times out loud, vulva, vulva, vulva. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Vulva, vulva, vulva. Okay.
So my campaign to reclaim the word vulva has gone quite well. I appeared on the Big British Breakfast show last week that's hosted by a lovely woman called Lorraine Kelly, who's like everyone's mum. She's the mumsiest woman in the world. And right at the end of the interview, she went, I'm going to reclaim the word vulva at 8:30 on British TV, which was great. Except the subtitles had it that she said, I'm going to reclaim the word Volvo, which is a very different thing.
Like the car?
The car, exactly. The very reliable Swedish car. And there are similarities between the Volvo and the Volva. It's very reliable. It's hard to, they're easy to mend. You can fit a lot of kids in the back. So in a way, that was appropriate. But it just proved that when a subtitler still doesn't know the word vulva, we still have a long way to go.
Oh, that's something. Okay, so here's the thing. When you write your book when you're 70, I want you to pinky swear that you're going to go, you've gone from cunt to vulva. I want you to go from vulva to clitoris. That's your next step.
What do you think? You don't talk about it enough? Do we need more clit?
I think we do. Yeah. I think politically we do.
Yeah, well, I was reading about witchcraft, and one of the things that would have you be labelled a witch and then be burnt at the stake. It was so much shitter to be a woman 400 years ago. And one of the ways that you could tell a woman was a witch was you would examine her body, and if she had any kind of protuberance or what they would describe as a nipple within her genitals, then that was seen as a teat that the devil would suck on. So literally, if you had a clitoris, or particularly a large clitoris, then that was seen as a sign of you being in league with the devil, and that was where he suckled, and then you would die. So yeah, we need to make sure that people know in the future, in case things get hairy again, that yeah, that doesn't prove that you're in league with the devil. You simply have a clitoris.
Good trivia. I like that. So we can get off that a little bit and tell me, like, what's on your to-do list right now? Tell me about your to-do list.
I've got it here. It's always near. Where's it gone? I think I've got to get the windows replaced because they're leaking. I've got to flea the dog. I've got to change my banking to an ethical bank. I need to get the electrician in to mend the lights in the garden. I need to, I've done that. I got my IUD, my coil, my new one fitted yesterday. That turned out badly. As I got there, they went, "You don't mind having a trainee, do you?" And I had a moment of like, okay, well, I am an elder now. So, and my vagina and my vulva and my cervix have seen a lot of service. So that's probably good that I'm going to take that one for the team and teach someone how to insert a coil for the first time. It's better me than an 18-year-old who it's the first time they've had their internal examination. But there were several bad sentences. One of them was, "I don't know how hard to press on the needle when injecting the cervix." The sentence, "It's bleeding, is that normal?" And my favourite one, "There's something in the way, something lumpy. I think it might be a fibroid." All things I don't want to hear. It was horrible. It lasted 20 minutes and I fainted and they had to give me a special sugar afterwards. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I know.
That's awful.
I know, it was horrible. So I've done that. So I can tick that one off the list. I've done that horrible thing. That's done. And they were like, "It's going to be in for 10 years. So you'll be 50 by the time you'll be 55 by the time they take that out and you'll be infertile then. So hurrah!"
So that's it. You'll be done. That's wonderful. Yeah. So tell me about the to-do list. Why was that where you sort of started things with the book?
Well, I think all women, and particularly middle-aged women, have a to-do list. And I think we also think that our proper lives won't start until we get to the end of the to-do list. It's like the amount of women that I've spoken to who were like, "Yeah, well, my proper life hasn't started yet. Like in about 5 years, when I get to the end of this to-do list, that's when my life will really start. When everything's totally sorted, that's when I really start living." And I realized that I'd been thinking that since I was 21. And the to-do list is the symbol of this, the never-ending nature of being a woman and the amount of tasks that you have. And I've had a revelation since I wrote about it. So I wrote about it in the book and about how every woman has this to-do list in our head. It's why we often can't relax during the first 10 minutes of sex because we're just running through a to-do list in our head. It's the thing that obsesses us. And I realized I need to externalize my to-do list. It needs to not be in my head anymore. Mm-hmm. So I bought a huge whiteboard and I put it up in the kitchen and I wrote at the top of it, "Here's everything that's in mummy's head." And then I wrote the first 50 things on my to-do list. And at the bottom I wrote, "Everybody pick 3 of these, write your name next to them, and they need to be done by Friday." And since that happened, I think it's put my menopause back 5 years because I was so full of rage and screaming about the patriarchy before when just I was doing the to-do list. But now everyone's helping me with my to-do list. I've stopped screaming about the patriarchy at 3 o'clock in the morning and I am now a happy woman. So this would be the one piece of advice. Because I wrote a column recently, I was thinking about the 10 Commandments. I went and had a look at this amazing exhibition at the British Library. And there was all these different Bibles and they were showing the 10 Commandments. And it's, "Thou shalt not kills in there twice. You shall not be prideful. You shall not covet another man's ass." And I was just thinking, these are all commandments for men. Like, you don't need to tell women not to kill because look at the statistics. We genuinely don't. You don't need to tell us not to be prideful. Women are constantly criticizing themselves and beating themselves up. I think the 10 Commandments are for men. So then I was like, well, what would the 10 Commandments be for women? And I think the number one for us is martyrdom. We tend to martyr ourselves. We like to walk around and sigh and go, "You don't know how much I do." And we need to not do that. And the externalization of the to-do list is the first time that I felt that I had tackled one of my original sins. I had found one of my commandments. Don't be a martyr anymore. You have to share out the tasks or you will just die of resentment and then explode.
That's interesting because I thought you were going to say when you said you externalized it, I was pretty sure you were going to say that you wrote it down, that you just wrote it down as opposed to just running in your head. But that's taking it to a whole new level. Yeah,
I made sure that the to-do list was everybody's problem. And the amount of women that I've told subsequently that I've done this and they've gone, "Yes, like, why hasn't that occurred to me?" But like, we think that, we gain an odd pride from it. I think we do like the martyrdom a bit. Like, we think that no one else will do it better than us. We'd have to spend so much time explaining how to do something that it would be quicker to do it yourself. We all think that. And you just have to go, the other people in my house are going to have to learn how to do this at some point. I can't go around being resentful and knackered all the time, because I've tried that for 20 years and it was shit.
You know, I will say, and I think that you address this too in the book, that for me, the thing that has been the saving grace in that regard is that I married a guy who could cook. And
Yes.
it's like my first piece of advice to young women is you have to marry, if you're going to marry a man, marry one who cooks, because if they can cook, it means that they can do a whole lot of other stuff. And it just takes this huge thing right off your to-do list.
Oh God, totally. The amount of time that I've spent thinking I should be able to do something creative with cabbage tonight. The amount of times I've just tried to work a leafy green vegetable into a meal for a child. And yeah, if you've got someone else sharing that, my husband, thankfully, I wrote a lot about this, about how I don't like to be an older woman giving advice to younger women generally, because I just think that will get on your tits when you're young. Just like, go away, I don't care. But the one piece of advice I always give to younger women is don't marry a cunt. Like kind of so many women marry their glass ceiling. If without exception, like life is an experiment. I'm 45 now. Without exception, all the women I know of my age who are doing well in their careers and are happy have husbands or partners that do at least 50-50 of the housework and childcare. And all the ones who are not doing well in their careers and are resentful are the ones who have partners who do less. And even if your partner's doing 47% of the heavy lifting in the house and with the childcare, that's still an extra 3% of your life that you are giving to them. And all you have is your life. All you have is your time. And so don't marry your glass ceiling. You know, you have to ask these questions early on. And thankfully, I dick moved my husband by never learning to drive. So he's always had to do the school run, which means that he's always there for the conversations with the kids. Like, he's got to know them. He knows all the gossip. There's a certain quality of conversation you have with your kids if you're driving, particularly when they're teenage, that you won't get anywhere else. So yeah, he has to get all the shopping in. He has to do the school run. And I can't drive. And that worked out quite well.
Yeah, see, I think that my G-rated version of "Don't Marry a Cunt" is marry a guy who can cook.
Yes.
It's the same thing. And and that is, you know, you talk a lot actually about marriage, and we should say, I mean, obviously you come from a particular context, you come from a particular perspective. You are not trying to speak for everybody across every ethnicity, across every identity, across every sexual orientation. Though I think everybody can find points of connection within what you write. And I really valued what you wrote about both good marriages and not so good marriages, and how that starts to be exposed at midlife. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, part of the problem is that we don't tell stories about how you stay married. Like, all the movies are about how you meet and then they end with a marriage, and then that's it. It's supposed to become silent at that point. It's seen as indiscreet for you to talk about your marriage. You're supposed to just deal with it on your own. And there's nothing to template off the back of. Like, you know, how do you raise children? How do you stay together? You're supposed to keep all these things secret. And if you have a happy marriage, it's seen as boastful. You know, you worry that you might be boasting, or that an evil eye might be cast upon you if you start talking about your happiness. And there's several reasons why I think this is really destructive. The first one is, when I first met my husband, the only thing that I really knew about a long-term marriage was all these reports that said that you fall out of love with your partner around about 7 years in. All the initial chemicals that attract you to someone are gone, and then you just settle down into this kind of friendship where you might occasionally have sex, but you're generally a bit resentful and but that's it. You're stuck together and you just have to hang on. And so for the first 6 years of my relationship with my husband, I kept waiting for it to go rubbish. I just presumed that would happen. And I was so sad about this idea. But then we sort of got to 7 years and then 8 years, and I was still excited to hear his key in the door. And I got to 10 years and I was like, maybe this isn't going to happen. Like, maybe we will just be in love forever. And that has proven to be the case. But I literally didn't know that was an option, because I had never seen or read or heard tell of people who were still really happy together. And I think this is part of the sort of disservice that we do if we don't talk about successful relationships. As older women, we need to sell the concept of becoming older women to younger women. We need to let them know that it is just as brilliant and expansive and joyful and lovely as being younger, that you will still have the excitement of being in love, even though you've been together with someone for 20 years. Because at the moment, you know, I'm so aware that for younger women, that the whole idea of getting older just seems to be one of loss and lack. You will not be attractive anymore. You won't have the thrill of being in love anymore. You will feel that your body is degenerating, that you will be less attractive, and gradually your life just dwindles, and like your peak is in your younger years. that's a terrible message to give younger people. You know, especially as I've got teenage girls now, I feel that part of my job is to sell to younger women the idea of getting older and go, you've no idea how brilliant it will be. There's all this tough stuff, but life is tough, but you will get through it, and the rewards are incredible. You know, we go on about sort of losing skin elasticity, but along with losing skin elasticity, you lose the amount of fucks that you give. And for women, that is so liberating. By the time you get to 45, like, you know, you realize that generally, you know, it doesn't matter if people don't like you. You don't need to go to that party. You don't need to wear those shoes. No one cares. It's fine. It's so liberating.
Yeah, I do think that's the big joy of midlife, is that you just don't care. That
Yes.
you can be yourself again for the first time since you. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, like, do we really need those 35 years in between when you couldn't totally be yourself? Can we do something? You know, how do we fix that?
Yeah.
So that you can take it all the way through, you know?
If younger women didn't care as much as older women do, there would be a revolution tomorrow. Because if they had the energy that you have when you're young and the idealism that you have when you're young, but you also had the freedom of not caring about what people think, we would change things tomorrow. And if I could put that into a pill and give it to younger girls, that would be the one thing that I would do. Because, oh my God, if I had the energy of a 20-year-old and the confidence of a 45-year-old, then I would be your next president.
That'd be good. And, you know, speaking of being older, being younger, a lot of us midlife women have teenage daughters. You do, I do. And some of the deepest parts of this book oscillate between the peace and joy that you're finding in your body finally at midlife, and what's happening to your daughter, and how hard that is as a feminist and as a mom. And so first talk about your recognition and the real importance of loving our bodies as midlife women, or really loving your body as a woman ever.
Yes. Well, I was very much at war with my own body as a younger woman. And as I got older, I think by the time, especially after I'd given birth to my first child, I suddenly respected my body for the first time. I can remember after this incredibly difficult birth, just looking down at my body and just patting my legs like they were a lovely horse or dog, and just going, oh, guys, you're great. Like, you just keep on walking, and that's just so good. And arms, look at you. You've been arming now for like 27 years, and that's just awesome. And just finally respecting my body for the first time. So my children were brought up in a very body positive house. I'd just be wandering around naked and wobbling my tongue in front of them and going, hurrah for cheese sandwiches. And so it was, and also, again, the story that I've been told of getting older was that your body would just become worse and worse. And that was a sad fact, and you just have to get used to it. But I have not found that to be the case. I have started swimming in cold water and doing yoga and just really enjoying my body. Like, I know that, like, for so many people, you will have spent your entire life with people going, you look a bit tense. Maybe you should try some yoga. And that will have made you even more tense, because the kind of people who try and tell you should do yoga are usually quite annoying. And when I found out in the end that yoga wasn't what I thought it was, it's just mucking about. It's just moving again like you did when you were a child. If you look at the poses that you do in yoga, and you're just moving around and going upside down and doing head over heels, that's what we naturally do as children. But as we get older, we're told to sit up straight and be quiet. And then we have a really tense phone call with someone that we hate in accounts, and we clench our buttocks and we do some shallow breathing to get through it. And then we don't relax and start breathing again properly. And so when you finally do yoga for the first time, you have a sigh, you stretch out, you move into your back, and you suddenly just discover the joy that you had as a child moving around, but in your older years. And I found that so liberating and so beautiful. And of course, the beautiful thing about yoga is the more you do it, the better you get. So the older you get, the better you're getting at your body, the better you are at doing these poses, the stronger you feel in your body. And the best I will ever be in my body is the day before I die, because that'll be the point where I'll have done the most yoga and stretching and enjoyment. And again, I was like, why didn't I know this when I was younger? That, like, it actually gets better. You feel happier in your body. Like, you get rid of all these aches and pains, and you're just like, look at my shoulders. They're fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I will say, I don't want to belabor yoga, because yes, people hate it when people belabor yoga. And I am somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. So I'm very into it. And I will say that, you know, when I was younger and I did it, it was about the body beautiful. And as I'm older, it's about just caring for and loving and enjoying what my body can do, appreciating what it can do and wanting it to be able to keep on doing it. And that is such a different orientation to your body.
Totally. And it's something that's done totally for yourself. When you're doing sort of exercises when you're younger, as you say, it's all about the body beautiful. How can I improve my body so that it will please others? And when you start doing this kind of work on your body, it's literally just for you. No one's watching you. No one sees what you do. Like, kind of, it's just you feeling good in your body. And the liberation for a woman to be able to do something with your body that is just for you, that you feel happy about, it's quite unique. It had never been explained to me that you could do something that was entirely just for you, whenever you wanted, that would make you feel better for the rest of the day, and that you would look forward to every time that you went to bed. You're like, in the morning, I'll do some more stretching. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, when for a lot of us who hit midlife, our daughters are just coming into their adolescence. And in the hour of teenage parenting, you talk about having a teenage daughter, and you know, we raise our daughters in a world that is maybe more abusive towards them and their bodies than even when we grew up, right? And at first you write about them in a really funny way, and I really enjoyed watching you kind of twist in the wind when your daughter comes down in an outfit that you kind of go, a little too much skin there, honey. And I want to, can you talk about sort of, because I get that question every time I talk about girls. Tell me about, you know, how you deal with that, how you dealt with that, what you did being jolly.
So one of my daughters came downstairs dressed for school in a very revealing outfit. And I was like, maybe pop on a cardigan. And she said, don't slut shame me. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I realized how difficult it is to be a woman who is raising her daughters to be strident, outspoken, clever feminists, because the first people that they will be clever, outspoken, strident feminists at is you. And they have so much more energy. And they also have a whole new vocabulary from this younger generation of feminism. And what you're trying to explain to them is, look, I personally don't care what you wear. Like, you could come downstairs in a PVC gimp mask and nothing else, and I'd be like, absolutely, fair fucks to you. You wear what you want. But part of my job as a parent is to prepare you for the real world. Like, I'm like the practice circuit. Like, you know, kind of, you know, I'm going to tell you what the outside world might say to you, and you will get reactions wearing this outfit that you need to be prepared for. If you are prepared for them, that's absolutely fine. But I need to be the one that just tests your confidence, and for you to know how the outside world, basically, if someone's going to shout, "Oi, tits McGee" at you out of a van window, if you can cope with that, that's fine. But if that's going to destroy you for the rest of the day, it's my job to prepare you for that. And I did not know how to do this correctly until we started watching RuPaul's Drag Race, where I realized that drag is basically the gamification of femininity. And it's, so if you're sitting and watching that with your girls, and you're watching boys construct themselves to look like women and to act like women and dress like women, that you can use that as a brilliant learning point. And RuPaul's attitude to her baby drag queens is absolutely perfect, because she loves them, she adores them, but she's also preparing them for how tough the world's going to be for them. You're basically like, as a mum, you're basically like the door bitch on a gay nightclub, and you have to like make sure that, you know, if you're sassy at those girls and those boys that want to go in that club, that they'll be able to handle it, and then you let them in. And if they can't handle the sassiness, then you're like, maybe you're not old enough to go in here yet. So RuPaul has been so useful to me as a feminist mother for having these difficult conversations about slut shaming. And now whenever my daughters come downstairs in a sassy outfit, and I'm like, and they're just like, yes, and I am ready to go out there and rule the world. And I'm like, okay, you're fine. You may go. You have passed the test.
Mm-hmm. And then one of your girls slowly starts going into crisis. And it starts with her saying, "I'm not beautiful." And can you talk about that moment?
Well, I mean, I think we know as a woman, well, for me, one of the things that I feared most was my children saying, "I'm not beautiful." Because as a mum, if you go, "But you are beautiful, of course you are," they'll go, "Well, you have to say that, you're my mom." Like, the outside world isn't going to say that I'm ugly. And you know what happens to a girl who is ugly, what her place is in the world. She is the butt of a joke. She's the character in the film that the boy goes on a date with, and you know it's not going to be good, and before he finally meets, you know, whoever, Renee Zellweger or whatever, like, you know what your role is in life. And I was wrestling with this for so long to try and talk about what beauty is and what its role should be in your life and how you should present yourself. And I was like, at the moment, your idea of what is beautiful is how people will see you. It's all about beauty being in the eye of the beholder. You are the beholder. That's the key thing. It's you are the beholder. You are deciding what is beautiful. You decide what you look like. Let's talk about who you think is beautiful. Let's look at the posters you've got on your wall. Let's look at the heroes that you love in films and movies and stuff. We can talk about beauty, but beauty is subjective, and you are the one deciding what that is. So then let us talk about beauty as it being something that you decide, that you collate, that you curate, rather than just being something that you are judged by other people. You are the beholder. And that was... I could see lights going on her head when I was telling her that, like, kind of like, it's down to you to decide what is beautiful. And that for that daughter was a very liberating experience for her. And I was like, okay, I give myself 10 points of parenting today.
Yeah, I love that. And then on the other hand, you know, for a lot of us, we deal with a child who goes into a mental health crisis.
Yes.
And I want to first of all thank Nancy, your daughter, for allowing you to write about that, because that's a really big thing. And it means a lot, I think, to a lot of people that she allowed you to write about her having an eating disorder, her engaging in health, self-harm and suicide attempts. And I think as a parent, I was really grateful to read about how your family went through that really difficult time together. And it was a really useful thing. So I wondered if how you can talk about that to us.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, being useful is the thing that I want to do most in my writing. I want to comfort people, and I want to be useful. And so she is my hero because she said, you must write about this. She is now, thankfully, fully recovered and extraordinary and just on fire in an incredible way. I know, and we know how lucky we are. We know what the stats are with mental illnesses and with eating disorders. But she was very blunt about it. She was like, for my generation, there is not the stigma around mental illness that there is for your generation. We will talk about it on social media. We can talk about it amongst ourselves. But for your generation, you were raised in a time when there was a massive stigma and shame around mental illness, and you are our carers. And while you have this shame and guilt, you are fucking it up. Like, you are not able to help us. And so in the book, I talk about all the different approaches that me and my husband took before we finally found the right way to help them. So I think it's very common for parents to try and parent their way out of a mental illness. And you can't parent your way out of mental illness. All the things that you would work before in any other circumstance don't work. You can't incentivize them getting well. You can't go, I will give you this treat if you get better and attend your eating program and your therapy, because they are full of guilt and they are full of self-negation. They will not accept a treat or a gift. You can't punish them. They're punishing themselves. You can't reason your way out of it. We would sit down and give her TED talk after TED talk at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about nutrition and mental health and all these things, while she just got sadder and sadder and angrier and angrier. I would try being angry. I was like, maybe this will raise her out of it. I tried being sad. Like, if she sees how sad I am, maybe that will motivate her. We tried everything. And I realized that my Achilles heel, I think generally I do parent very well, but my Achilles heel was that I was scared of her sadness. I was raised in a household where you couldn't be sad. You would just jolly your way out of it. You would just crack on. And God, we tried to jolly her out of it. She would come through the door and we'd be like, and we'll watch this movie and I've bought you some pet rats and then we'll play a board game and it'll be fabulous. Jazz hands. That does not work. And I needed to finally sit her down and go, first of all, you have to identify it. You have to speak what you see. You have to go, I can see you are sad. I can see you are angry. I am not scared of that. I will love you whatever happens, and I am going to be with you all the way through this. And as soon as we did that, in that order, all of those sentences in one go, the transformation was extraordinary. It was the start of her recovery, because we weren't trying to pretend it wasn't happening. We weren't trying to talk her out of it. We were going, we acknowledge it. We're not scared of it, and we're going to be with you. And there's an amazing book by an author called Eva Musby. I think it's just called Dealing with Anorexia. And she writes scripts of what you say to your children when they're going through these kind of crises, which are extraordinary, because if anybody out there has dealt with a child going through a mental health crisis, part of what is so difficult is that the calls are coming from inside the house. Like, they have a voice in their head, and that voice in their head wants to argue with you. It wants to make you emotional as a parent. It wants to make you angry so that you have an argument rather than dealing with the actual problem. And with these scripts, in the heat of the moment, you know, you can say one wrong thing and it's all over. If you're following these scripts calmly and constructively, that's when you start seeing a real difference. So that was a massive breakthrough for us. And she's now, as I say, fully recovered. And I wanted, you know, she told me there's a lot of things you can write that are useful to parents, but I also wanted to give parents out there hope. because the statistics that you're given are roughly 30, 30, 30. So 30% of children make a full recovery, 30% a partial recovery, but they will still have problems around eating. They might be orthorexic, and 30% remain ill or die. It has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness. And when I was looking around for any stories that had ended well, I couldn't find any. Every book that I found ended badly or with someone still ill. And even though the statistics are brutal, you need hope when you are dealing with that illness. You have to be operating on the principle that your child might get well and make a full recovery. So I was just like, let's put a good story out there, because you are going to need it when you're in the trenches with this kind of illness. So it has been my great honor to be able to tell her story. And she's so my hero for saying, go out there and write about it. And we serialized it in the Times a couple of weeks ago, and the response was incredible. We had hundreds and hundreds of messages from families saying what was really important and useful to us was that someone with a public platform, who generally presents as, constructive and sort of sympathetic parent, spoke about this. And you have now removed the guilt and shame and stigma around it, because if you are saying that it happened in your family and that you struggled with it but you found a way through it, then suddenly I feel that I can talk about it. And that is, of all the things that I've ever written about, even abortion or anything, that seems to have been the most useful thing. And that has been my greatest honor as a writer, to be able to write about that.
Well, thank you. It is a huge gift, and I'm really grateful that you did write about it. And I'm worried that we're getting a little short on time, but I just want to say there's so much else in this book. I love the way that you talk about social media and cancel culture and how we as women have to think about that. I love your discussion of what about the men. I love that the ultimate deep revolutionary, the women's union that you talk about that we need to do politically, and the deep revolutionary aspect of this book, that you're an aging woman and you're happy. And mostly, and I want you to end on this discussion, being a hag and having your coven.
Well, this is, again, another reason why I wanted to write it, is that we don't talk about the different phases of your life. Basically, you're young and you're sexy, and then you're just old and it's over. And I wanted to reclaim the words hag and witch and crone, because when you go back and read in history about what the lives of witches and hags and crones were, which are now seen as pejorative words, their lives are awesome. They're living in the woods. They've got, their house is their own. They're in complete control of it. They've got their herb garden. They make their wines and their tinctures and their medicines. They meet up with other hags and crones and cackle in the woods until 3 o'clock in the morning. People are scared of them because they don't give a fuck and they're stomping around. They have an animal familiar, either a dog or a cat or a particularly clever crow. And they go and swim in the wild naked, and it all sounds amazing. And I was like, if I had known that the hag life was what was waiting for me at the end of my young and sexy years, I would have been so thrilled and excited. I'd be like, yeah, fast forward me to the hag years. They sound like the good years. So it's about trying to joyfully reclaim the word hag. That's something to look forward to. I want to be a hag. I am a hag.
Our hagiography. We're going to get there. Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note of optimism and joy, take it, John. You want to give us some questions?
Yeah, we've got time for a few questions. The first one, I have a 7-year-old son, and I want to be able to speak to him about how to treat women without completely overwhelming him with the shit we had to put up with. What's the best place to start to give him the best groundwork advice?
Well, I write a lot. So when I wrote How to Be a Woman, obviously it's a book about feminism and women. And whenever I would do public appearances, one of the first questions I would be asked was, what about the boys? Like, what advice have you got for boys or mothers with boys? And for the first 5 years, I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm team tits. Like, I'm just literally doing this for the women. Like, it would be the ultimate irony of feminism if women, having sorted out all the problems of women, then had to sort out the problems of men. And then I started thinking about the definition of feminism, which is the belief in the political, social, and personal equality of the sexes, and thinking, well, there's just as much gender bullshit about being a boy as there is a girl. But what we are lucky to have as women is feminism, this completely crowdsourced, beautiful, centuries-old thing where women, whatever problem they have, you can type it into the internet and you'll find a discussion or a blog or a book or a film somewhere that will address that issue. And women can share their problems and name them and legislate for them, and we all support each other. And boys don't have that kind of network. They don't have that kind of resource. There isn't anywhere where men can talk about their problems and the problems with the male gender. And I went on Twitter 2 years ago and went, I'm always asking women what their problems are, but what about you boys? Like, what are your problems? And suddenly this whole other world opened up to me. Like, one mum going, I can play my girl loads of songs about how great it is to be a woman. I've got thousands of empowering Beyonce playlists, but there are no songs about how great it is to be a boy that don't sound a bit weird or violent or edgy. There's no way to celebrate boys. Boys aren't supposed to love beautiful things. I had so many men going, no one's ever bought me flowers. And that sounds like a really simple, sad thing, but like kind of flowers are there for everyone, but only women are supposed to have them. And I was retweeting all of these, and one man said, after I read these tweets, I went and gave my 94-year-old father some sunflowers, and he burst into tears and cried and went, no one's ever given me flowers. Like, that's so beautiful. And the darker side of this is that boys, after a certain age, are seen as a threat. I had so many men going, if I'm in a playground and I see a child that's lost, I feel that I can't go and help them, that I would have to go and find a woman and get her to help that child because people might think that I'm a paedophile, or I'm going to be violent. And that's a terrible thing for young boys to grow up with, feeling that they are a weapon or a threat. Like, it's so innate to humans to want to help other people. So I think what we need to, and I'm astonished that, I write a lot about how as a woman you have to be a professional woman and a professional feminist and help other women. I'm really surprised that men don't feel that they need to be professional men and help other men. There are so many good liberal males that we know with public platforms, and they never address issues of masculinity. They never talk about the confusions of being a young boy or how limited your options might feel as you get older. And I feel we need to start putting pressure on men who've got a public platform and go, you need to start talking about gender too. Like, because here we are with a mum going, what can I say to my boy? Men need to be addressing that problem. Like, kind of, I can highlight it and go, this is a conversation we need to have, and here are some ideas I've got. But the men have to start stepping up for the youngers, because the only men that are generally stepping up at the moment and giving advice to boys who feel lost or confused tend to be men's rights activists. And that's a whole, and incels, that's a whole world of pain that boys have got waiting for them. So we need to empower the men who have public platforms to start talking about what would make lives better for men. Basically, men need to have feminism. They need to have that kind of network and start those kind of conversations.
The next question, the audiobook of How to Be a Woman changed my life. Thank you for writing it. I'm an American and marriage and children is a bad bet. Any advice about it?
So is that what she's saying, that she thinks that marriage and children are a bad bet, like she doesn't want to do them?
I think maybe by virtue of our country, perhaps.
Oh God! Oh my gosh! Yeah, Christ! I mean, obviously this is a very difficult time politically across the Western world, and particularly in America and the UK. And the only thing that can give you hope, I think, is if you start reading history. And without exception, when we go through a good phase and a progressive phase and a time of enlightenment and joy and progress, it tends to be just after a terrible phase. So if you are feeling despair at the moment, just read a bit about history and it will start to comfort you, because you realize that however awful this is, absolutely inevitably the wheel turns around and we go through a phase of progress again. This is a phase of destruction, and at the end of this there will be a phase of reconstruction. And I think that the positive thing about this is that I suspect when we get to the next phase of reconstruction there will be more diversity in the people who are allowed to rebuild society. Previously, when we've had stages of progress, it tends to be white, straight, middle-class people leading the way. And I think now the conversation has widened out, and we know that when we start reconstructing society after this period of destruction, it will just be more diverse. That we'll have people of all classes and all colours and all religions and all abilities going, okay, this is the new, this is how we want to rebuild the world. So I am a born optimist, but the history tells me that I am correct.
I think we have time for one more question. And the person who asked that question said that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Oh, mate, I wish I could give you a big hug. It is a massive shit show at the moment. I just think watch RuPaul's Drag Race more and watch Schitt's Creek. That's cheering me up enormously.
The next question is, Caitlin, do you have a message for my husband who has decided that now 11:30 at night is the perfect time to clean out the utility room and fridge because he's so afraid of what you're saying?
The message is absolutely carry on. And when you get to the Tupperware drawer where everything is mismatched, don't bother trying to fit the lids to the boxes, because you'll never do that. They've all got lost. Just throw all of the old Tupperware away and buy 10 all the same size so all the lids fit the boxes. Encourage him. Enable him. and then suggest that you won't even have to have a maintenance shag after this. It will be a joyful shag of clean housiness and joy. I find nothing makes me feel more sexual than watching my husband clean, and if all men knew that, then we would have a happier world.
Before we go, I just want to turn it back to you, Peggy and Caitlin, if there's any last words you'd like to say, or questions you didn't get to, or wisdom before we depart.
Well, I just want to say what an absolute honor and treat it is to talk to Peggy again. I know the work that you are doing about boys and gender at the moment, and it is so important and so necessary. And I love this fact that we are now saying that feminism has to be for everyone. I think that is the next stage of feminism, because feminism is an idea, and it's only as useful as the amount of people who feel that they can believe in it and can take part in it. And it has to be all of us. It can't just be for women. So Peggy, I salute you. You are an absolute hero of mine forever.
Aww. You're wonderful. And I just want to say that I hope that we don't have to wait for a new book to see one another again. It's lovely to see you, Caitlin.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you, darling. Let's get to a bar and drink some beautiful wine as soon as we can. And everyone is watching, you are invited too. Seriously, we will put it out on Twitter next time we are in a bar when all of this is over, and you must all come and join us. It's been so lovely to spend time with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. You can purchase Peggy and Caitlin's books at the link I've just dropped into the chat. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for this wonderful conversation, sharing your time with our viewers. And we hope you continue to stay safe and be well, and hope to have you in our humble little bookstore in Ann Arbor sometime soon. But until then, stay safe. And to all you who've joined us tonight, we thank you, and we'll see you at the next event. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye all.